And so we begin, as we do all spiritual practices, with prayer. So I invite you now to get comfortable and to join me in consciousness. Together we recognize there is one power and one presence that we call God, that we call love. And we know that we are united with that power and presence right now. We are open and receptive to the living spirit of truth, to new ideas, to an expanded and greater spiritual understanding of who we really are. We welcome that expanded consciousness, that enlightened awareness into our lives right now. We open our hearts. And with a great sense of joy and thanksgiving, we acknowledge that where we are right now is holy ground. We release this prayer knowing it is done. And so it is. Hi, I'm Reverend Scott DeMarco, and I want to welcome you to the first class in the first course, New Thought Principles. This first class is appropriately called New Thought Basics. So we are going to start in the very beginning, which is the perfect place to start. It's the beginnings of really what our thought system, what is our belief system, who are the key players that were involved. And so we're going to kind of start with who we are. We're going to take a look at our family tree, take a look at the key figures during our movement between the 1800s and the 1950s, and certainly our movement continues today. But who were our founders? Who were our founding fathers and mothers that contributed to the belief system that we have today, and also certainly influenced much of what you see in modern spirituality today? What do you see kind of in spiritual books that you would see at your local bookstore? How are those, in essence, also the principles of New Thought? And as we go back in time, we're going to go back to our roots from the beginnings of human thought and look at our New Thought antecedents. How did those people come and bubble up and through? How did those thoughts and philosophies bubble up and through what we know today as modern New Thought? So this is really a way of thinking and being, a way of finding a new you, a way of redefining for yourself what God is and how God works in your life, and using your spiritual power for good, using it to improve your life and the life of others, and changing the world one thought at a time. And I know that sounds like a tall order, but believe me, that's why we're here. This is the purpose of our life and the purpose of our journey here. And we are going to explore together as we move through these courses how that works. What does our thought do? How does it form and shape? And what does God expect of us? What is God's will? What is Spirit doing in and through us in our life and in our world? So I'm excited to get started, and let's start at the beginning. So I want to start with a sort of agenda for parts 1 and 2 of Class 1, New Thought Basics, just to give you an idea of where we'll be going in this part of our journey. And again, it's split into 2 modules, Part 1 and Part 2, 2 separate videos. And in Part 1, we're going to start with a section called In the Beginning, where we'll take a look at some passages from the Old and New Testaments. We'll move into a New Thought overview, a look at our family tree from the 1800s to the 1950s. And I'll point out some key figures in that history. And then we'll do an in-depth look at New Thought antecedents. What came from the very beginning of time? What added to our concept of the wisdom of the ages and lent itself to our teaching today? And then in part 2, we'll look more in depth at the key figures in the New Thought movement from the family tree, with some history, some information about those individuals, their teachings, and their writings, and then move into basic New Thought principles. And here we're not going into it with the expectation that we're going to understand those principles at a very deep level, but I want to give you an idea of what our ideas are, what are our general beliefs. So that is the thrust of the New Thought Principles section in part 2. Okay, so now that we've sort of reviewed our agenda and we know where we're going, we are going to start to move into what we call in the beginning. And in this portion, we're going to look at some sacred texts. We're going to look at some passages from Genesis, from the Old Testament, and from the chapter of John, first chapter of John in the New Testament. And they are really the creation stories, just one more traditional, one more mystical. And so we're going to be drawing from those, not your typical Bible study, but really trying to pinpoint some of our New Thought principles and concepts. And since we are really based in a Judeo-Christian system, I thought that we would start with something traditional and try to extract some metaphysical meaning from it. I also threw in there a little bit of quantum physics and Albert Einstein just to keep us on our toes. So I'm excited, so let's get started. And so we begin with the beginning of the Old Testament, or Genesis 1 from the King James Version. And we're reading this not literally. We're going to try to draw from it some metaphysical principles. So from Genesis 1, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. So here we have two major principles. The first, that the earth was without form, in line 2. That in the beginning there was nothing, there was no form, there was no thing. And into that nothingness, God put a thought, or used the power of his word and said, "Let there be light." And so something happened. Light happened. And light is one of our basic spiritual principles, the concept of light. We see it in all traditions, in all religions, in all spiritual belief systems, this concept of light. So here we have Albert Einstein. Where's he coming from? Well, we're going to try to take a look at quantum physics briefly and see why it's important to us. Einstein's work in the early 1900s, which coincides with the work of those in New Thought, but his creation of a new set of laws and principles to govern physics. And what science really is a set of laws and principles. And in New Thought, we use spiritual laws and spiritual principles. So we'll see how science and religion, which for 2,000 years had been separated, are now, through the growth of our understanding of spirit, are coming together again in our understanding of how God works. And I want to share this quote. "The most beautiful and most profound experience is the sensation of the mystical. It is the sower of all true science. He to whom this emotion is a stranger, who can no longer wonder and stand wrapped in awe, is as good as dead. To know that what is impenetrable to us really exists, manifesting itself as the highest wisdom and the most radiant beauty, which our dull faculties can comprehend only in their primitive forms, this knowledge, this feeling is at the center of true religiousness, or for us, true spirituality. And this is from Einstein's Merging of Spirit and Science. So this is really about us encountering the mystical, going beyond the literal teachings of traditional religions and looking at the mystical idea of God and standing as a little child, standing with rapt wonder and rapt attention and wonder and awe, opening ourselves up to new ideas and seeing how this thing manifests itself in our world. And through our study, hopefully, we move beyond our comprehension in primitive forms, and we gain a deeper and richer understanding to enhance our spiritual knowledge of true spirituality. So here we have, of course, Einstein's famous equation, E equals mc squared. And why is that important to us? Well, this was a revolutionary concept, a concept that shook the world, that energy is the same as matter. And so we go back to some of the words from our first reading from Genesis, and the earth was without form, and God said, "Let there be light." And here we have the two sides of the equation, that which is without form and that which is. Or our equation in New Thought, that a thought or idea plus a belief coupled with spirit equals an expression. This is E equals mc squared, or thought energy equals things, or, to put it simply, thoughts are things. Now, the concept of creation from nothing, or creatio ex nihilo, dates back to the beginnings of Christianity. It's not new to us. That something came from nothing. And for us, that nothing is divine substance, is infinite potentiality, or substare, that which stands under creation, that which stands under form. So this nothingness from which everything came is the soil that produces the plant. When we put the seed of thought into it, it is the substance of all things. And so we want to try to draw that parallel to the Big Bang. How do we draw it back to science? In the beginning, there was nothing. And from that came a Big Bang that started the formation of all that is, formation of the universe. So in the beginning, there was nothing. And spiritually, through the self-contemplation of spirit, or spirit's first thought that it put into divine substance, came this Big Bang, this big expression, this big creation of life that propelled all things forward through the power of mind. So in the beginning there was only mind, there was nothing, and then a thought was put into mind, a thought was put into infinite potentiality, and from that came form. Okay, so we've just had a good start taking a look at metaphysical meanings behind sacred texts from the Old and New Testament, the creation story, and kind of expanding that to the quantum level to bring it to the level of thought and belief, which we will certainly explore later. So we're just kind of laying the groundwork for you to have an idea of an expansive thought system, and one that is based not only in traditional spiritual principles, but also can be tied directly to modern scientific principles. So that's where we wanted to get started, and now we're going to move into our basic history, taking a look at our basic family tree. And also I wanted to start with something a little whimsical, which is a poem about New Thought. So let's get started. So I want to begin our exploration of New Thought with a poem. Take a page of Epictetus and a Plato paragraph. Shake it briskly till the mixture makes the gentle scoffers chaff. Add a light Socratic flavor, not in excess of a dram. Add a weak solution formed of Persian epigram. Mix a bit from old Confucius and from Buddha, several drops, and Egyptian lore from the Pyramid of Chops. Now some truths not half remembered, and some others half forgot. Bottle the mixture, boil it briskly, till it simmers in the pot. And Lord bless you now, my brother, and the skeptics all be shrew. Can't you see that you're approaching the thought that's labeled new? It is thought, I said with reverence, much of this is very true, but if I do not displease you, what in thunder makes it new? Came the answer, lo, poor skeptic, hear the truth and doubt no more. Such a mixture's mixful mixing has never been mixed before. And so we have here, of course, the idea that we have as a thought and belief system in New Thought come from everywhere. We are, in a sense, spiritual mutts. We have drawn the resonant truth from many, many different teachings, many, many different teachers and philosophies. And it is only that special combination that makes our teaching so special. So I just wanted to share that with you. Now I want to take a look at our family tree briefly. We will look at some of these individuals in more detail as we move through the class. But this will give you some idea of the movement that we call New Thought in its inception and its growth, and those that influenced it from Swedenborg all the way at the top, all the way to the left. Phineas Parkhurst Quimby, we'll talk more about him later, known as the father of New Thought. All the way to the right, Ralph Waldo Emerson, writer, philosopher, transcendentalist, and how that came down in the mixing of our thought system. In the center, William James, of course, great American author. And on the left-hand side, we start to see some of our teachers with teachings. Mary Baker Eddy, who was the founder of Christian Science, and her student to the right, Emma Curtis Hopkins, who was known as the lost founder of New Thought, or lost mother of New Thought, or the teacher of teachers, for her work with Melinda Kramer and Nona Brooks below her, who went on to start the Divine Science Church. Also below her, and next, Myrtle and Charles Fillmore, who worked with Emily Cady and founded the Association of Unity Churches, or the Unity School of Christianity, that is still in existence today, of course. And her last student, all the way to the right and down, is Ernest Holmes, who wrote The Science of Mind and many, many books, very prolific author and teacher. And as an outgrowth of his teaching, we have the religious science churches. And we see there that in this diagram, they were split into the United Church of Religious Science and Religious Science International. They have, since this chart was created, reunited and are now the Centers for Spiritual Living. All right, so now you've had a chance to take a look at the cast of characters. And before we move into a little closer examination of some of those people and their influence today, and certainly some of their writings and writings about them, I want to take this chance to go back in time, as I promised. So now we're going to examine the New Thought antecedents, and we're going to travel all the way back to ancient Greece, begin there, and look at some key ideas that came through as the resonant truth that we know today. So Let's time travel. And so now we want to talk about some of the antecedents to New Thought, those that came before the family tree that we just took a look at. And this goes back to the beginnings of human thought. We have Epictetus, who is a Greek Stoic philosopher, and his influence. Heraclitus, with his idea of universal substance, and that there was one basic principle as the ground of reality. And this is certainly part of our teaching today, the idea of universal substance. We talked about it earlier, that which stands under all creation. And a basic principle is the ground of reality of all that we see. Plato, the classical Greek philosopher, he is greatest influence on the unfolding and relentless stream of truth. The relentless stream of truth, or the resonant truth, that evolved and bubbled through into Neoplatonism in the Middle Ages, and of course Transcendentalism of Emerson. So his idea of the existence of ideas, very important. How ideas and the universe is the embodiment of mind, how the idea becomes things, the existence of ideas as entities, as something, and that things are a reflection of ideas in the mind. So again, going back to our fundamental formula that thoughts are things. We have Aristotle. Aristotle coined the term metaphysics, or metaphysike, or beyond the physical. So, of course, this idea of moving beyond the physical and into the mystical or the essential ideas, or the realm of ideas themselves, is very important to New Thought. Zeno, he said that problems are related to attachments to external things. And as we move forward, you'll see that we turn away from the external as that which is real. We don't deny that they are part of God, but we turn ourselves to cause or to God. So it is our attachment to the external instead of our attachment to God that creates challenges in our life. Zeno said we have a need for an inner rhythm or balance, and we would say we have a need for spiritual poise. We have a need for alignment with God. We have a need to recognize God as our source and supply. And his idea that we deny that which is contrary to natural rhythm and affirm the opposite. So we are denying that external things or effects in our world are as important to us, or are really the source of things that cause, or God. And our alignment with God is what really brings us harmony and balance in our life. Of course, the Hindu and ancient Vedas, the idea of oneness, the idea of dominion that we talked about before, interbeing, our interrelatedness to all things, that we are all connected at the level of spirit, at the level of our divinity. We are all connected, we are all one. And the Vedanta, that suffering is caused by separation in consciousness. It is our separation from God, our idea that somehow we are not one with God, that creates our suffering. So we always want to return to our idea of spiritual unity. Lao Tzu, his idea that the human spirit has its source in divine fountain. Of course, again, that God is source, and that evil is the block of the natural creative action of the divine flow, or that evil, again, is connected to this separation, that we are out of unity. We are in disunity. We are in separation from the divine. Akhenaten was a young pharaoh with some very revolutionary ideas, and he came to rule in a time where there was, of course, polytheism, the idea of many gods. You see that, of course, if we look at Egyptian monuments. But he came to power with an idea of a universal loving God. So he was way ahead of his time. And the ideas of polytheism were restored after his death. His ideas of a universal loving God, of one God, were not accepted by the Egyptian people. But nonetheless, we believe that Akhenaten had great influence, that there were those that believed these ideas, that embodied these ideas, and it still remained a part of their society. His idea that there's one God that he called Atan, that was the life-giving force of light. So there again we have the idea of light as God and a life-giving force. And also revolutionary, that the Pharaoh was not a god but human. So here he is bringing himself back to equality with the people. And of course, I'm sure that had a great deal to do with his belief system being rejected with the next pharaoh that came. But we believe, again, that the teachings or ideas of Akhenaten still remained, and that they influenced Moses, who was, of course, from Egypt, and that influence trickled down into the Judeo-Christian stream. So these ideas continued on and forward into our belief system today. And of course, we have antecedents like Jesus, Meister Eckhart, Spinoza, Bruno, the Buddha, the psychologist Jung, and of course, Native American beliefs and shamanism, the connection to nature, the unity with all that is. And then all of our major religions, Islam, Hinduism, Christianity, Buddhism, and Judaism. From Christianity, we have the Gnostics, or the mystical followers of Jesus, the Kabbalah, the mystical Judaism, the idea that that we were all part of an essential unity that was split into shards, and that it is our responsibility to reunite these pieces back into oneness. And the idea of the Philosophia Perennis, or the perennial philosophy. Aldous Huxley wrote, of course, the book The Perennial Philosophy, which is an examination of the inherent and resonant truth in all teachings. And he does a very good job of arguing that we are all connected and not very different after all. Of course, Cicero, St. Augustine. This is by no means an exclusive list. We could go on and on. I just wanted to throw some people out there and show you that we really are quite a mixture of thought systems that came forward. So our New Thought antecedents, of course, we see here the world's religions, the exoteric and esoteric teachings and mystical traditions that come together in our New Thought belief system. And how together we meld into New Thought when we take the common thread, or the perennial philosophy, or the wisdom of the ages that runs together to form this magnificent and life-altering belief system that we have that allows you to understand that we are fundamentally the same and that we are fundamentally part of the divine. So this is the wonder of our teaching. Okay, so this will end part 1 of this class, and we've had a great chance to take a look at some thoughts from the beginning, from traditional scriptures, interpret those metaphysically, to take a look at some of the key figures in an overview of New Thought, and also to take a good look at some of the antecedents, those that formed and shaped our teaching and thinking today. So I want to thank you for joining me for part 1, and I look forward to seeing you in part 2. And so we close now section 1 of our first class, New Thought Basics. So please join me in prayer. And together we recognize Spirit, God, everywhere present, the source of light in our lives, the source of all things, the substance of all that is. And we recognize ourselves as a piece of that wholeness, as an expression of that light. And we know and affirm that we have come forward to be the light of the world, to demonstrate God in all its glory, to bless the world. And so we gratefully accept this mission, accept this as part of our life's journey. And we know it is so and release it. And so it is.